Hello and welcome back. In this video we shall touch on a couple of intersecting talking points. In the previous video we discussed how Britain was connected to the Near East via trade and through isotopic analysis, plus we heard from historians such as Strabo, Herodotus and Pliny the Elder, etc. on the geography of this tin trade. So let us pick up where we left off in that previous video. If we look back, we can see that the mines were very active in Britain. Given this was a mining trading society, surely governance and a military presence must have been active in this period also. Due to this wealth and societal reformation brought about by an increased desire for metalworking, used for a plethora of needs, from financial, commercial to industrial and status related, as we shall discuss with the Bronze Age weaponry in the future. We previously touched on links between Britain and the Eastern Mediterranean, but what we did not discuss was how early trade between Britain and Europe was much more widespread than previously thought. We find evidence of copper mining in Wales some 3,600 years ago. That was so productive that the metal reached France, the Netherlands, Germany, Denmark, Sweden and perhaps further afield. During this British period, agricultural communities combined stock rearing with cereal cultivation. Despite this somewhat insular vision of scattered farming communities of Bronze Age Britain, there is evidence of strong trade and exchange links with continental Europe as well as the Eastern Mediterranean. The exceptionally rich copper ores of the Great Orme, for one example, a mine in the north of Wales on the coast, is a focus of worthy attention. This was one of the largest Bronze Age copper mines in Europe. I have come across research online which combines archaeological and geological expertise with the latest scientific and analytical techniques, which reveals a radically different picture to an animal skin wearing peoples living in mud huts. Extensive sampling of ores throughout the miles of Bronze Age workings, along with associated bronze tool fragments and copper from a nearby smelting site, have allowed fingerprinting of the mined metal based on chemical impurities and isotopic properties. Allegedly around 1000 BC, the production of bronze slows down in Britain with the use of recycled and foreign metals found in the archaeological record. Moreover, across Britain and parts of northwestern Europe, we see an explosion of newly mined or untouched bronze metalworks introduced on a large scale. Why was there a drop-off? Why was there such a drastic shift towards continental imports? This was a highly advanced society from metalworking, cattle rearing, and agricultural communities capable of commerce and self-defense. The surprising results revealed a distinctive metal rich in nickel and arsenic impurities, and combined with isotopic signatures, closely matched the metal type that dominated Britain's copper supply for a 200-year period, circa 1600 to 1400 BC. Remarkably, this metal is also found in bronze artifacts across parts of Europe, stretching from Brittany to the Baltic region, showing a clear linkage between the mining industry in Britain and the most powerful societies of Northwest Europe. Was this exchange of such metals solely based off of trade, or perhaps much of it was carried off as spoils of war? As we can see on this map, the very area of a theorized conflict is the epicenter of a trove of Bronze Age artifacts to be found in Britain, East Anglia. Was much of this bronze spoils of war? This movement of metal fits nicely into the notion of a large-scale conflict in this period in Eastern England, warring against the union of kings under Agamemnon, of a potential Argos or Northwest France, of which there is a plethora of reasons as to who, what and when still to discuss, and we shall discuss. What is striking is the overlap during this time frame, a period to which seen a large-scale genetic influx from mainland Europe into southeastern Britain, as discussed in a previous video, the destruction of which is still being revealed by the land. However, the archaeology and genetics are not the focus here. Around 1000 BCE, we see the establishment of the Etruscan civilization on Sardinia and northwestern Italy. For context of when this slowing down occurred, the Etruscans are a people who apparently built their early settlements of this period elevated and in a defensive mindset. I wonder why. Well, is it no surprise if the peoples are fleeing persecution? We shall have more on this topic as we discuss it further down the line. Also, when we discuss Antenor and Aeneas's adventures away from the Troad, and we shall discuss these topics sooner rather than later. I did mention previously in part 1, Follow the Tin, that the Phoenicians were Trojan. However, I am not suggesting they are of the same tribe, more part of the same social network. Perhaps the term Phoenicians was an umbrella terminology that later became an association of later city-states such as Carthage and Tyre, as we see repeated throughout history of people wanting to be associated to communities of the past. Perhaps these societies were also. For evidence of this, look no further than the major powers in Europe for thousands of years, many of whom claiming Trojan descent. From the Brits to the Franks and even the Habsburgs claimed ancestral lineage to the Trojan survivors. By say 600 BC, the entire Mediterranean, Aegean and Hellenistic world as a whole was enamoured with the age of heroes and the epic of the Trojan War, already centuries old, and we're using a related language evolved from a more ancient variation. The Canaanite language, sometimes referred to as Canaanite dialects, are one of 3 subgroups of the Northwest Semitic languages, and others being Aramaic and Amorite. These closely related languages originate in the Levant and Mesopotamia, allegedly, and were spoken by the Semitic-speaking peoples of the area encompassing what is today Israel, Jordan, the Sinai Peninsula, Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, as well as some areas of southwest Turkey or Anatolia, western and southern Iraq, also known as Mesopotamia, and the northwestern corner of Saudi Arabia. This script was partially influenced by the older Egyptian hieratic, a cursive script related to Egyptian hieroglyphs, which is said to be translatable into English via the Cymric, Cymry or Welsh language, one of the original forms of the British language. I defer anyone who is interested in this element to the late and great Ross Broadstock's book featuring Wilson and Blackett's work called Moses and Hieroglyphs for further information. Welsh and Hebrew also have close origins. A writer named Glass submitted a list of Welsh words with their Hebrew origins in 1832, and I quote now from Glass: "The best proof of the Eastern descent of the ancient British is the close resemblance and connection existing between the Welsh and Hebrew languages, even at this day. As a proof of this, we have extracted the following vocabulary of words in both tongues, so closely resembling each other in sound and sense as to leave no doubt whatsoever on the subject. Many of these words, it will be found, have been transmitted from the Welsh through the Anglo-Saxon into our modern English. It would be easy to swell their numbers." Unquote. The Semitic alphabet became the ancestor of multiple writing systems across the Middle East, Europe, North Africa, and Pakistan, mainly through the ancient South Arabian, Phoenician, Paleo-Hebrew, and of which is closely related and is virtually identical to the Phoenician alphabet, or even derived from it. I am going to go with the latter, and we shall find out why. Alas, with all these cultures, from the Greeks to the Persians, Macedonians, and Romans, Celts, Gauls, and then finally Britons, of around 500 BC, now using the etymological revolution of the Phoenician alphabet, which has its origins in the movement of mythology, artifacts, DNA, and language over 1,000 years before. One would think the language originated from a powerful empire capable of mining and trading tin and copper far and wide, when in fact we are told it was mere merchants who had decided to venture out and eventually settle far and wide from the Mediterranean out beyond the Pillars of Hercules. Well, this Phoenician culture of wealthy seafaring tradesmen must have originated from somewhere, and I believe they did so in the west, not the Levant of the eastern Mediterranean. Was there once a powerful society that the Phoenicians were a part of? Perhaps. Perhaps they were based in Britain. Perhaps they were based in several other places, such as Brittany, Portugal, and as far south as the Canary Isles. In a time of less seafaring threats, trading over multiple generations until the age of empires saw the rise of small provinces that became states, that became powers within their own right, having naval power, and who sought to seek monopolies over trade and natural resources. These states even absorbing the colonies, now cities as I say in their own right, under new banners from the Atlantic regions to the Middle East. It appears that later centuries saw the Atlantic coast and its kingdoms looking inward rather than outward for several centuries, with almost a regression in society throughout Europe. Voyages out west and south started to become more frequent. Eventually, after the Middle Ages, we see new empires rise and seafaring nations begin again the lucrative long-distance naval trading from the same areas. We have the Dutch, the British, the Spanish, and the Portuguese that all became massive players in exporting their cultures around the world. Could it not have been possible for a similar structure to have existed in the past? However, I digress on that point for now. Prince Madoc sailed to America apparently in 570 AD, shortly followed by many more of his then Welsh kinsmen, after the growing conflicts and arrival of waves of attacks, Christian migrants and other settlers from the continent in greater numbers, with the population beginning to swell, mainly in the southeastern part of England, with Vortigern allowing the Saxons to enter the lands on his behest, only to later have to submit to the Saxons, granting the father of his newlywed wife the kingdom of Kent. And the rest is history, as they say. Homer, when addressing Troy, speaks of the fields of corn, the wide plain, and the many horses, are just a couple of points raised that I wish to get into maybe next, as the archaeological videos I shall be doing will shed a new light on this and previous videos. All this indicates a very high society in the northwestern part of Europe. I say all this, however, we have only pecked the surface. Alas, I shall end this one here. I still have some more info, as I say, to drop on this topic, so keep an eye out, as well as plenty of other dives into our past, as well as some book readings, which I'm looking forward to reading a few chapters out of various books, because I think the information is quite prudent really, and it will help build that bigger picture. I hope you enjoyed this one, guys. Stay safe, and I'll catch you in the next video. Peace.